this piece, I think, is a fascinating piece. It's a piece which we're all going to really, really learn a tremendous lesson from, and maybe even understand more about how great Reb Leib was. He starts off by quoting the Talmud in Masechet Betzah that asks the question, why is it that the Torah was given to the Jewish people? Alluding to that they are not meritorious, they don't really deserve to receive the Torah. They weren't all that righteous at that time when they received the Torah. They just came out of Egypt. They were idol worshippers themselves. So the Talmud answers, because they were azin. Azin in Hebrew means they were bold. They were bold because they were given the Torah in order to engage in studying its wisdom, which will weaken their strength and subdue their hearts and their evil inclination to good things and not to negative things. Then Reb Leib quotes the Midrash. The Midrash sounds to differ a little and gives both advantages and disadvantages for the fact that the Jewish people are bold, that they have a sense of boldness to them. A disadvantage we can understand, because bold means you're kind of in someone's face. Bold is you're maybe overconfident. But an advantage to boldness that the Midrash explains is that because the Jewish people were bold, they were able to withstand the awesome experience of Mount Sinai. You see, Mount Sinai was a very scary episode for the Jewish people. There was tremendous amounts of thunder and lightning and the shofar blasts, and it was and the voice of God. It was something which only a bold individual, a bold nation, was able to withstand. And now Reb Leib also continues and says that the Midrash we just quoted uses a different expression to boldness. See, boldness can be in Hebrew referred to as azut, which is in a positive light, but there's also a very famous word which can be found in the English dictionary, the Merriam-Webster dictionary, of chutzpah. You know, chutzpah has been adapted as an English word as well. Now, chutzpah is a definite Hebrew word. Chutzpah means brazenness, which is different to boldness. So Reb Leib is trying to understand, why does the Midrash use brazenness opposed to boldness when it speaks about the Jewish people's aspect of boldness? It doesn't only categorize it as boldness, but also as brazenness, which would also mean someone in a negative light, which all contradicts. Now, again, I'm just giving you the introduction that he gives of all the different aspects to boldness, because he has a very strong point that he's tying it into. But he says that this Midrash that portrays the Jewish people as being bold and brazen is very contrary to what the Talmud tells us in Masechet Yevamot, page 79a, that there are three signs to a Jew. You want to identify a Jew, you want to identify, categorize the Jewish nation, it is by these three signs, which have an acronym of Gever. Gever means a man. Not man excluding a woman, but man like strength, like a man of your word. Gimel standing for Gomlei Chasadim, meaning kind people. You want to know if a person is a real Jew or acting as a Jew, they have to be kind. The second is Bet for Baishanim. They have to be modest. They have to be bashful, embarrassed when doing something inappropriate. And third is Rachmanim, merciful. So again, a Jew, the Talmud says, is kind, modest and bashful, and merciful, which seems to contradict the whole concept of boldness and brazenness that we see in the earlier sources of the Talmud and the Midrash. So which one is it? So Reb Leib writes so beautifully, he says, it appears that there's an inherited double-edged trait that we inherited from our patriarch Abraham, which includes both of these areas, both of these concepts. On one side, we need to be kind, modest, merciful, but that's when it comes between Ben Adam lechavero. One realm of obligation that we have is between us and our fellows. We need to be kind. We need to be remorseful, graceful, merciful, modest, bashful. Yes. But when it comes to Ben Adam Lamakom, our relationship between us and our Creator, Reb Leib says, we need to act in a different way almost. We need to act with a sense of boldness. Now, boldness is not haughtiness. We should not make a mistake. Boldness is, as we're going to soon explain, what that means. He proves this, and he says that the Mishnah itself testifies in Pirkei Avot, in the 5th chapter, the beginning, the 3rd Mishnah says that Abraham was tested with 10 tests. And he endured and he overcame all of them successfully. So, before we continue on this concept of boldness, I would like to maybe go through a quick recap of those 10 tests, which of 6 of them are found in this week's Torah portion, 6 of the 10. So very quickly, and I will introduce these 10 tests by saying that there's different opinions on what the 10 tests of Abraham were. Now, why was Abraham tested? Abraham was tested not because God needed to know, it was to prove to himself. It was for him to grow through those tests, just like we have tests in our own lives that we grow from. These tests were there for Abraham to grow, for Abraham to prove to himself, for him to attain a new level. So these tests, I'm going to name the 10 tests according to Maimonides. It's worthy to note that there are different opinions amongst our medieval scholars, our Rishonim, what the 10 tests were. According to the Rambam, Maimonides, the first test was the fact that Abraham was told to leave his hometown, Lech Lecha. That's the first test. The second test was, as soon as he came to the land of Israel, there was a famine. Can you imagine being told by God that you're coming to the promised land? You get to the promised land and you have to flee because there's a famine. There's nothing to eat. No Amazon to order food, no restaurants, no water, no food. Tough luck. And he was forced to go to Egypt. The third test was the fact that he went to Egypt and that Sarah, his wife, was kidnapped and taken to Pharaoh as a wife. That was another very, very hard test that obviously no husband would ever want to endure, or wife for that matter as well. The fourth test was Abraham fighting against the 4 kings and winning. The fifth test was the fact that he had to take his wife's maidservant Hagar as a wife in order to have a son. Again, we're talking about the model of purity, which was Abraham. And for him to have relations with a midwife in order to bring a child into this world was not his idea of purity and holiness and bringing his children into this world. That was his fifth test. His sixth test, which is at the end of this week's Torah portion, is the test that he was given to circumcise himself. Can you imagine at the age 90? So imagine any age to circumcise yourself is hard enough. At 90 years old, it is definitely a very, very painful experience, especially if you have to do it to yourself. The seventh test was when the king of Gerar took Sarah again, kidnapped Sarah. That's in next week's Torah portion. Then the eighth test is the fact that he had to expel Hagar from Hagar and his son Ishmael from home because of the bad influence that they were going to cause on his son Isaac. Well, that was the eighth test. The eighth test was having to expel Hagar. The ninth test was having to expel Ishmael, his son. And the 10th test was the test and the ultimate test of the Akedat Yitzchak, of having to sacrifice his son, which we'll speak at a later date more about. Having said that, let's get back to Reb Leib. So those are the 10 tests. Reb Leib says that our Mishnah testifies that Abraham not only endured, but he succeeded in passing all 10 of these tests. He says, imagine how strong Abraham had to be to pass these difficult tests, these trials and these tribulations. That Israel, us, Bnei Israel, inherited this boldness and strength and dedication from Abraham that he had to fulfill the will of God It was implanted in our very souls being as his descendants. The fact to withstand any difficulties that the world will come. In Hebrew, it sounds very good. In English, I'll say it as well. But in Hebrew, we say that when a person's committed, they're committed ba'esh u'bamayim. Whether it's through fire or through water, they're there and they're going to be there committed. And those were the words that Reb Leib used. Ba'esh u'bamayim, that Abraham was with God, whether it be fire or water, good or bad times. Abraham was completely committed to God. Why? And he would never abandon God because of his unwavering commitment and boldness to continue in his way. Now, this is, Reb Leib says, the unusual approach to how we characterize Abraham, our patriarch. How do we normally characterize Abraham? When we just went through Sukkot. And Sukkot, on the very first day, that's Abraham's day, he is our guest. We always refer to Abraham as our right hand referring to the right side of God and the side of mercy, compassion, kindness, in Hebrew, Chesed. That's how we refer to Abraham. But no, here we are introducing a different association of the trait of Abraham. And that is the strength and boldness that Abraham had in order to succeed. He succeeded so much that he actually inherited a title for himself. And the title was Avraham HaIvri. Avraham HaIvri literally translated mean Abraham that's on the other side. As the Midrash says, Abraham was really on the other side of the rest of the world. See, the rest of the world were all idolaters, and he was the one and only who understood in the concept of one God, of a creator of this entire world and universe. And this put him at odds with the rest of the world. How can someone stand up to, as we said in the beginning of the class, to their society and the ideologies and the theories of their social spheres and all of that which they were brought up with? How does someone have the strength to do this? It's from their boldness, from their unwavering commitment to something greater than everything they've learned. Now, Reb Leib goes through a fascinating experience to show how committed Abraham was and how bold and strong he really was. He says, can you imagine committing yourself to someone or something, and then all of a sudden that person turns on you? Or that same person who's commanding you or requesting for you to do certain things goes and asks you to do things which are completely contradicting those things that he already asked from you. And now, being so committed to that person that you have an unwavering faith to not veer off of those commandments. And he gives the examples by Abraham, because this is exactly what happened to Abraham. He says, let's look at Abraham's life. At first, the very first time God revealed himself to Abraham was when Abraham was 70. I want to just put that into perspective, and that means that from age 3 until 70, that is 67 years, Abraham was searching for God, and he already was believing in something greater than everything he was taught, and had absolutely zero confirmation of it. Okay? So from 3, he started questioning. He started questioning the idols, questioning the sun, the moon, the stars, the weather. So many great things that he was taught that were each gods in their own right. He started questioning and saying, it doesn't make sense that we come from this, or that this is a god or gods. Till he came to the conclusion there must be something greater and there must be a one God. And he already caused much havoc and chaos all before he had confirmation from Hashem that he was even on the right path. At 70 years old, God for the first time comes to Abraham and tells Abraham that yes, even though you had a childhood full of difficulties and hardship, that which you believe in is true. I am here. I am for real. And he promises Abraham by the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant that Abraham forged with God, God forged with Abraham, that he will inherit the promised land and he will have many children. That happened at the age of 70. At 75, God comes back to Abraham and tells him a prophecy, as we just said, to leave his homeland and go to where he will show him to the promised land. And that he'll be blessed with this. Blessed with children, wealth, and fame. Now, after decades of suffering, not having children, it finally looked like there was hope to him and his wife having a child. Can you imagine being 75 years old, not having any children, giving up almost, and God coming and saying that he promises you'll have children? It was upon entering the land of Israel that immediately the famine struck. We saw, you could find this in chapter 12, verse 10. It says, Vayira av ba'aretz, vayered Avram mitzrayma lagur sham ki chaved arav ba'aretz. The Torah tells us as soon as Abraham came, a famine hit the land and Abraham was forced to leave, forced to go to Egypt. So let's just get this, says Reb Leib. God promises Abraham to go to a promised land where he's promised wealth, fame, children, all the great things. And he comes to a land of famine? Isn't that contradictory? Only a person with a tremendous amount of strength and boldness will say, I still believe in God. I'm still going forward. And that wouldn't stop him. And now, if we think of it, he was promised to have children. It took him 25 years after entering the land of Israel that Isaac was born. 25 years at 100 years old. Is that not contradictory to what God promised him? And even, let's continue. Reb Leib says, at the end of Abraham's life, when he passed away at 175, how many descendants did he have? A total of 4. He had Ishmael. He had Isaac. He had Isaac's 2 sons, Esav and Yaakov. Now, out of those 4, we can dismiss 2 of them, which were unworthy, Ishmael and Esav. So to summarize Abraham's promises from God, that he and his descendants would inherit the land of Israel, to which he comes in and there's a famine, contradiction, to which he only has 2 out of 4 sons which are worthy. Where's the multitude of nations that God promised him? Where are all of these promises? To which Reb Leib continues, and he says, we can go even further. We can go further to see another, to unveil and to unravel another understanding on this great test that Abraham had. And that was the test of the Akedah, the test of God coming in and telling him to come sacrifice his son. This is the ultimate contradiction to everything God has told Abraham since the time he met him. Meaning Abraham was 137 years old at that time. If we quickly take 137 minus 70 years old when God first met Abraham, that is 67 years. For the past 67 years, Abraham has been told and promised by God that he is going to have children with Sarah, his wife, that are going to continue a great nation. Finally, his son is 37 years old. He's almost at marital age, back in those days. And he's commanded to sacrifice him. Yet what did Abraham do? He went. He went. Reb Leib says the only reason why he went to do it was because he was bold. Reb Leib is trying to define us what bold really means. Bold means strong. Bold means committed. Abraham was fearless. He said, anything it's going to take for me to fulfill the will of my God, he will do. The Midrash even tells us how forceful the evil inclination was to not allow Abraham to try to fulfill this test and to pass this test. The Midrash tells us that the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, came to Abraham and told him not to go. And he continued, and then he brought a river in between him and the place he had to get to. and kept on higher and higher and higher. And Abraham was almost drowning, and right until he giu maimad nafesh, until the water came all the way up and Abraham was almost drowned. Then the illusion of the river that the evil inclination brought to Abraham to try to sway him from fulfilling God's will vanished. Where did that all come from? From his boldness. Now, I have to be honest with you. I personally have never understood Abraham in this light. What Reb Leib is teaching us over here is a novelty. We always refer to Abraham again as compassionate, as loving, as merciful, as giving. But there's another side to Abraham that Reb Leib is uncovering for us this evening. And that is his unwavering persistence in order to fulfill the will of his God. And now the question we all are asking ourselves, and that thankfully Reb Leib asks and answers himself, where did Abraham acquire this strength from? Where did his commitment to be so committed to the will of his Creator come from? One that was unprecedented, one that surpasses Adam's and obviously Noah's. So Reb Leib says that Abraham acquired this level during his prophetic vision, during his nivu'ah, that followed the war that he won, that he was victorious in, against the 4 great kings. You see, very soon, again, Abraham coming to the land of Israel, in his first year, he went through nothing but chaos. At first, he comes in and there's a famine. Then they go down to Egypt, and then his wife is abducted. And then he comes back home, and then he has a fight with his son-in-law, with his nephew Lot, and they split. Lot splits. He goes to Sodom. I'm saying this really quick. You'll find it in this week's Torah portion. When he's in Sodom, he gets conquered by these 4 great kings, amongst them Nimrod and others, great kings, very strong kings, and he's taken as captive. Abraham has to go and wage war and save his nephew and family. And so he does all of this at 75 years old, leaving his home, famine, Egypt, wife, coming back, Lot, World War I, all of this at once. During that nivu'ah, right after he's victorious over the 4 kings, God came in a prophecy told Abraham that he will have a biological son to continue. Now, just remember, Abraham had hundreds, if not thousands, of followers at this time, which he brought all of them under the wings of God and the understanding of the one God, Creator. And then God makes a second promise. He tells him that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars. Reb Leib says this is a new promise. Can you imagine I come to you and I make a promise to you? It's been not fulfilled yet. And then I make another promise, a new promise to you. So Reb Leib says, there's a new promise here, even though the first one has not been fulfilled yet. Take a look at your screen. And I'm going to show you. So the first promise we have in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Ve'escha legoy gadol. I'm in chapter 12, verse 2. God says, I'm going to make you to a great nation. I will bless you. Va'gadol shemecha v'yeberacha. And your name will be great, and you will have tremendous amount of blessing. Look at chapter 15, verse 5. This is right after Abraham is victorious over the 4 kings. I like to call them the Big 4. And I also like to call that era World War I, because it literally was. It was 4 kings versus 5 kings, and Abraham came to the rescue of the 5 smaller kingdoms, and won for them. Abraham is taken out by God. Look at what it says here. Vayotze oto achutza. Abraham is taken outside by God. Vayomer, God tells him, Habetna shamayma. Look up at the sky, usfor hakochavim, and count the stars. Im tuchel lisporotam. If you could even count them, they're so numerous. And he tells him, Vayomer, God tells Abraham, Vayomer lo ko yeh zarecha. so too will be your descendants. The next verse, I don't have it here on the screen. It says, V'he'emin b'Hashem, that Abraham believed in God. This is when Reb Leib explains that Abraham finally rose up to a new level. And he explains. He says, what did God do? God takes Abraham outside and he tells him, as Rashi explains, go to the stars. Look at those stars. You see them? They're many. I promise that you're going to have many, many children. Why is he telling him to look at the stars? Elsewhere, God tells him, your descendants are going to be as numerous as the sand. Why the stars? Rashi says, according to one of three interpretations, he tells him, look at the stars because you're a stargazer. This is something that was very common back in the day. You're a stargazer, and you're correct. According to the reading of the stars, Avram and Sarai will have no children. However, Avraham, with the changed name, and Sarah, with the changed name, with the hey added to both of their names, and meaning Hashem's name being given to them, you will have children. So God takes him out and says, get out of your stargazing. Move past that, beyond that. Because you will have a child, because you're going to have a new identity very soon. Rashi says that Hashem saw that Abraham believed in him, and in the merit of him believing and having that faith, God now promised to make sure that he has a child. Maimonides objects to Rashi's interpretation, and he says, I don't understand what merit we're talking about over here. Why would Abraham not believe in God? The God who's cared for him for so long, to the point where he believed in him so much that he came with the willingness to slaughter his own son. So Maimonides argues in Rashi and says, how is Rashi saying that because of Abraham's belief right now, he merited to have these promises given to him? What changed at this time? So this is what I like about Reb Leib. And Reb Leib goes, and I'm not going to go into the great length, but he goes into disagreeing with Maimonides and backing up Rashi. He says that Rashi makes so much sense, and there's no question according to Rashi. He explains that what Hashem was doing was he was validating that Abraham now is a complete believer. That in truth, what Maimonides brings up about the Akedah, about the slaughtering of his, or the willingness to slaughter his son, is later on. How did Abraham even reach that level that he would go with the boldness that we've been speaking about to slaughter his own son? And that was because at this moment, at the moment after Abraham wins that First World War, and he's promised a great promise by God to inherit this land, to have many children, and he believes it, now he has augmented his level. He has risen up to a level of having absolute faith in God with no doubtful thoughts at all. Reb Leib calls it blind faith. Only at this point, when Abraham was 75 years old, did he finally attain a level of blind faith, unwavering faith. This commitment that Abraham had in his belief, says Reb Leib, is what we can attribute Abraham's boldness and unshakable commitment to God to. It was the faith that he had in Hashem, and Hashem rewarded him for it. Hashem made it so that all of the promises he did promise to Abraham would come true to him. So Reb Leib then says that there's a practical lesson for us all from this piece, from this new concept that Abraham is not just Chesed, kindful, merciful, but he's also bold and strong. Comes and teach us a tremendous lesson as a father, as a mother, as a teacher, as an educator. Reb Leib says sometimes you see a boy and they are stubbornly misbehaving in a way that is unacceptable to you, to society, to your family standards. And now he says this doesn't mean that you shouldn't punish the child or discipline them. But we have to understand where this comes from. This stubbornness, this boldness is an inheritance from our patriarch Avraham Avinu. It's this boldness in our souls that has been absorbed into us from our patriarch. And it is up to great parents and great educators to not try to crush and uproot this boldness and stubbornness from our children. On the contrary, we're supposed to channel it just as Abraham channeled it in a proper way, in a healthy way. We're also supposed to personally and also encourage our children to channel their stubbornness and their boldness in a proper way, instead of defying and questioning everything that we tell them to do, obviously if it's for their own good, hopefully, but rather to use that stubbornness and that boldness to fight against the evil inclination, to fight against inappropriate influence, addictions, vices, things which pull a person down. That's where stubbornness and boldness and that strength is needed. Not to, yes, now your child may be using that stubbornness and boldness to defy you as your parent or as a teacher. But that's not really what a child wants to do. They have this sense of stubbornness and boldness within them. We need to teach them how to channel it. And very often it takes time. It takes time until they mature, Reb Leib says. So again, what Reb Leib is teaching us is he says that the goal of education is not to uproot a child's boldness completely. But on the contrary, there is a proper way to deal with any problem. And the way to do it is to explain to a child what is important in life and what is secondary, and how to direct in the proper direction anything that should be used. For example, all traits, amongst them even anger, is supposed to be minimized, kept at a minimum, but directed in a certain way. Kindness, also with no direction, is reckless. So is love. So is helping others. And therefore, stubbornness and boldness is also supposed to be used and directed in the proper way. And as parents and educators, we have to try to help our children to do it in the right way. So just to sum it up, and then I want to bring two important stories that we can learn from Reb Leib's life on this concept, is that as Abraham's descendants, we're also faced with tests in life, just as he was. Not great 10 tests of faith, but each of us at our own level are faced with tests in our lives. And we are tested to see how we're going to react to those tests. And hopefully we'll be victorious. Hopefully we'll overcome them. But what we have to understand is the only way to get through this test is by utilizing our strength and our boldness, just as Abraham was az kanamer, bold as a leopard. We're supposed to be bold as a leopard, bold as our patriarch. And how do we do this? Reb Leib says we do this the same way Abraham did it. What? We answered, what gave Abraham the strength to be bold and to be committed? He says it was through the faith in God, that unshakable, unwavering faith that he had in God, that allowed him to continue with God, ba'eshu b'mayim, whether it's in fire or water, no matter what. So Reb Leib's boldness is apparent in many areas, was apparent in many areas in his life. And I like to mention two areas that he had complete unwavering faith. And if anyone has the opportunity to read more about Reb Leib, and especially in the great biography his wife, Rebbe Chaya, put together, Lev Ha'ari, the heart of the lion, it's very evident that the person that had the single greatest impact on Reb Leib was his great Rebbe, Reb Aaron Kotler. Reb Aaron Kotler, the founder of the Lakewood Yeshiva. I want to give you a quick brief idea of what life looked like back in America in the 50s and the 60s, which to many of us maybe even before our lifetimes, and even those of us those who were alive then may not know this, that learning back back then in yeshiva was not popular at all. It was not as it is today, that many of our children or many of us after high school, we go to, you want to call it a gap year in Israel, or a couple years, or years that you learn in yeshiva and then you may continue with life or not. It was not popular at all back then. And even those who learned Torah, explains Reb Leib, back then they learned it for a purpose of, such as to get a job, to be a shul rabbi or a school rabbi. The problem with that is, he said that many people were just learning the practical laws and they took a quick public speaking course and then they were ready for their job. And unfortunately, they were lacking in many, many areas of what a true Torah leader needed. So this ideology of learning for a purpose was pushed by all American rabbis back then. Reb Aaron Kotler was the only rabbi in his time back then, the 50s and the 60s and even on, who was true to the authentic Torah values that he believed in. And he said that a person shouldn't have other motives, ulterior motives in studying Torah, rather, or to go and take a quick crash course in Torah to work as a rabbi. He believed that learning Torah needs to be learned for the sake of understanding all aspects of Torah and to become a true Torah scholar. And he was literally like Avraham Ivri, Abraham on one side, Reb Aaron Kotler was on one side, and all the other rabbis and all the other yeshivas were on the other side. He was also the only rabbi to openly back then be against, in America, against sending yeshiva students to university. And he was considered an outcast. However, history has proven itself, and Reb Aaron Kotler's ideology and boldness to stick to the truths that he believed in are proven to be true. If we look in the entire world, and maybe even if we want to cut Israel out of it, because Israel is definitely in a league of its own, the Lakewood Yeshiva, BMG as it's called, is the single greatest yeshiva in the world. It is second to none. To the point where the entire city of Lakewood was built around this yeshiva, to which is a tremendous example of Reb Aaron's boldness and dedication to raising a Torah nation, which he did. Any of you who's ever been to Lakewood definitely were surprised by what goes on there. It is literally living a dream. Now, this boldness was adapted by one of his greatest students, and that was Reb Leib. Reb Leib was completely committed to these ideologies. And this became very evident in 1958 when Reb Aaron sent Reb Leib out to become the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva in Boston, to which the yeshiva only had a maximum of 20 students who were unmotivated and mainly there just to be excused from having to be recruited to the American Army service. So they were definitely not motivated or wanted to be there. And Reb Leib had to come up with innovative ways to attract new boys to come in, local boys, boys from out of town, and he did so in his loving and his caring way, in his genius presentation of Torah. And he was successful. He was there for a decade. And in the book, his wife writes about him, how he was so amazing in fostering personal relationships with each student, knowing how much he could push each student enough to grow, but not too much to crack. And this balance of knowing what every child, what every boy needed in order to be pushed to grow, and in times need to recharge. How sometimes he would take them on trips, on walks. He'd even play sports, and obviously baseball, which was his favorite sport. He was very bold on his views. Just as Abraham was bold and strong, Reb Leib was also bold and strong. Strong like a lion. As his name is, Aryeh. Leib is a lion. He was bold on his views of studying Torah for real. not just to get through it or to move on or to learn just to get a job. No, he was so passionate and strong in his ideology to have his students continue learning Torah, and he was anti sending them to university, something which even today is not popular by many. He was anti-sending Jewish boys who were fit to studying, to dedicating their lives to Torah, to going to university. And he was not following the popular opinion back then and even nowadays. But he was relentless because that is what he believed. And he was successful about that. He was successful because of that. So that's one aspect of boldness and strength that Reb Leib had, was his Torah ideologies, his ability to push his students to grow and to learn, but push them not hard enough to crack them. And another that I had the great opportunity of studying with his son-in-law, Reb Leib's son-in-law, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Safra, this week again, and he told me that another area where we see the boldness and strength and the belief, which is the source of that strength and boldness that Reb Leib had, was that his father-in-law and mother-in-law, Reb Leib and Rebbe Tzimchaya, were extremely strict when it came to the laws of kashrut, of eating kosher. They were extremely bold and committed to the point that they would only eat from the most stringent kashrut agency in Israel, known to many as Badatz Edah Charedit, the highest level of kashrut, with the exception of certain OU products that he knew that he could rely on. He was ultra committed and bold when it came to his commitment to eating kosher and at the highest level. So based on everything we mentioned from Avraham Avinu and Reb Leib's explanation of boldness, is the question we have to ask ourselves is, how committed to Torah and to God are we? And do we tolerate things which we know are false and against the Almighty? And how strong do we believe and trust in God? You see, Reb Leib is teaching us that Abraham's boldness to do anything for God stemmed in his belief, which means for us, we need to further our belief and our trust in God. And we do that through getting to know God better, through the Torah that he gave us, studying it, through the world and the nature that he put us in, and seeing God, getting to know him better. So if we could sum up this part of the class, we can say that if we want to be strong and bold and committed towards God, we need to further our beliefs and trust in God. And that will help us in our unwavering commitment to Hashem and to Torah, just as Abraham had, just as Rabbi Aaron Kotler had, and just as Reb Leib Heyman had as well. With that, tonight's class is completed. And if anyone has any questions, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. Go.
Hi, I would like to make a comment.
Sure.
With Avraham, we placed a lot of emphasis of his strength. I think we have to place some strength into Sarah for her belief. And behind every famous man, there's a woman. And that's our Sarah, the mother of all children. So kol kavod to Sarah, who also had unwavering faith in Hashem and followed. And she was rewarded by having her Yitzchak. And the fact that Hashem had to tell Avram to cleave onto your wife and listen to your wife, and sent out Hagar with Yishmael. Men, listen up to your women. Take care. Thank you very much. Kol kavod.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. No comment, because I completely agree. Especially since my wife's name is Sarah, so it's like a double message.
So is mine. My name is Sarah Simcha.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for that matter? Okay. Yeah, Eileen.
Just remind me one more time, what was Isaac known for the most, and what was Jacob known for the most?
Okay, so Abraham was known for the most chesed, his
Abraham was
kindness, mercy.
But
yes.
But now we're learning a bit more.
Exactly, and now it's a whole new dimension.
Right.
It's not just kindness and mercy; it's boldness.
Right.
Boldness, not from the second attribute that's Isaac's attribute of din, of judgment, but there's a difference between judgment and strength and boldness. Okay, Abraham did not have the aspect of judgment to him, but he wasn't a weak man. He was bold and strong, but not judgment. Okay. And then Jacob is referred to as Tiferet, which is glory, which is emet, truth, which was the perfect combination between the right and the left, the mercy and the judgment. That was Jacob's bringing it together.
You know, it really makes sense because we're taught so much that Abraham is kindness, kindness, kindness. But if you're smashing idols, that was a big, bold thing to do as a young kid. So it kind of makes sense that we're learning more that he really was pretty, gosh darn bold.
Strong, bold, courageous, confident in his belief in God.
Right. It really, really, really makes sense.
I truly appreciate this interpretation because I've never heard anyone speak about it. To be honest, I've never read about it, never heard anyone speak about it, and I think that's what's very interesting and beautiful about Reb Leib's commentary is, yes, of course, he does speak about the main stuff that everyone speaks of, but he also adds in certain fundamentals and foundations which we may not find elsewhere. Very similar to the Zer Shimshon. We've learned over the past 3 years some true fundamentals that we have from the Zer Shimshon in Torah, life, and Hashem, our patriarchs, Moses, right? We've learned so much about that we don't find elsewhere. And I think that's what's beautiful about Reb Leib's Torah also. We're finding tremendous novelties that we can't find elsewhere.
Okay, one more question. Even today, would you say that someone who is so committed to Torah and it goes from, I guess, studies right into yeshiva, are they discouraged not to go to college? Like, can you have it both ways? Can you go to college and then go into yeshiva?
Should I turn off the recording or should I keep it on?
Go. We want to know. We want to ask.
Okay, I will tell you.
Because in some ways, the trueness of that really does develop someone.
I'll tell you Reb Leib's answer.
Okay.
I'll tell you that he's not the only one that gives this answer.
Yes.
And I'll tell you my addendum on it, which I'm sure Reb Leib wouldn't disagree with either.
Okay.
So the flat answer is that in many yeshivas, Reb Leib included, Reb Aaron Cutler, they all did discourage boys in yeshiva to follow up and to continue their secular education and their university.
Amazing.
Okay? This now that is a tremendous step, bold step. It's a step of strength. It's a step of commitment. I don't know how many of us can relate. Maybe yes, maybe not. But going and leaving the idea of a guaranteed profession or studying to have a guaranteed profession and going into to learning Torah for the sake of learning Torah, or for the sake of maybe putting food and bread and water on the table because you're going to be a rebbe or a teacher, which is not as rewarding as a normal secular job, let's call it that way, is something which takes tremendous amount of strength and boldness, and most importantly, as Reb Leib explained, belief and trust in God that you will be taken care of. Hashem won't go over you and fly over you and leave you behind, God forbid. So that is the ideology. The true yeshiva ideology is not to push kids towards university. It's actually to push when I say kids, it's more the boys. There's, with girls, there's other issues. Let's not get into that right now. But the authentic yeshiva ideology is to veer the students away from going to university. Now, my addendum on that, and Reb Leib would definitely agree, is if you have a child and they're in yeshiva, or a teenager even, an adolescent, even an adult, they're still in yeshiva and they're called, and they're not productive. They're wasting their time God forbid, or they're just not cut out for it, or they lost motivation. Of course, they have an obligation to try to keep their motivation up, and their rabbi is supposed to help them with that motivation. But if they lost motivation, they're not able to keep it up anymore, they do have not only an allowance, but an obligation to do something else. Now, whether that means to go to university or not, again, it's a case-by-case basis. And so I'm giving you the raw answer, and just like any question in Torah and in halacha, in Jewish law, there's always a case-by-case basis that needs to be analyzed.
So the answer is, you've been to university, you're being taken care of, you can now go to yeshiva.
Very good, Ron.
I have point of case.
Okay, I'm going to.
It's about time. You're supposed to be first.
No, that's not Isaac, it's Judah.
That's not Isaac, that's Judah. No, actually, Rabbi Laredo probably knows Ner Israel Yeshiva, one of the biggest strong yeshivas in Baltimore in America. They happen to be close to Johns Hopkins University. And I would say 20 to 30% of the students from there go and pass the bar and go and do this while they are studying. Like my son, Rabbi Ariel, studied there, and he got his master's in education while he was at the yeshiva at the same time. And then he gave me the diploma. Here, this is for you. but the point is that it's okay to combine them, because it makes them, if you study psychology and education, you're probably going to have other dimensions of the real world and become a stronger and better rabbi. So I don't think it should be put away, but rather it's okay if the guy have the courage to do 2 more hours at night.
So again, I agree 100%.
Yaakov.
Yeah.
Judah.
Give them the hard truth, Yaakov.
No, so Yehuda, the truth
Give
is,
it to them. Don't be a politician now.
It's a case-by-case basis.
The father of the rabbi speaks.
Yeah,
I understand.
It's a case-by-case basis, and certain people are, and it doesn't. It's not a knock on them. It doesn't mean that they're inferior. Certain people are just not cut out. I don't want to say they're not good enough, but they're not cut out for living that lifestyle or for studying at that depth and that amount of time. And therefore, opposed to them wasting their time, being that they are not at that level, then they are encouraged to sometimes do something else. Now, whether it means to go to university or not, again, it's a case-by-case basis. Other people have, for example, I'm going to give this example of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe went to university. Now, was that accepted by all or not? Again, it's up for debate. But he was a tremendous genius, and he went to university and he got his PhD in so many things, in doctorate and psychology and in all different types of things. And he was, a definite righteous person, definite tzaddik. And therefore, there are certain people who it will add to them, many people that it may take away from them. And again, the real answer, it's a case-to-case basis. We have to also understand in the 50s and the 60s where Baron Cutler came from and why Reb Leib continued that train of thought. The 50s and the 60s was still close enough to the Holocaust, which was close enough to World War I. Now, we have to understand the early 1900s and really the late 1800s is when the Enlightenment and the educational revolution was taking place in Europe, specifically in Germany, to which before that, a Jew never attended a non-Jewish school before. It was the Jews were the educated ones. They learned in the yeshivas. They learned from their fathers and their rebbes. And the Gentiles were none. Many of them were not educated, and there were the aristocrats and the noblemen who were educated through their own system, their own secular system of education. There was very little, if any at all, overlap between the two. And for the first time in the late 1800s, during the Enlightenment, when the European Jews wanted to feel as part of the rest of their society, that they started going and sending their children to university. And it was a real, so to say, war between the Jewish people, between the Jewish leaders. And Reb Aaron Kotler was still of that authentic, original ideology that there's no room at all for secular education for our children. Now, nowadays, we obviously see that in our yeshivas, there is somewhat of a secular education that's being given. It's within a Jewish atmosphere, right? They're taught about the maths and the science and geography and so many. I mean, I'm not going to go through all the subjects. Language, obviously, so many other parts of secular education which are incorporated into the yeshiva system. But the difference is it has its yeshiva environment, its Jewish educational environment to protect it from outside influences which are completely unnecessary and even dangerous. And that's why, as you said, Yehuda, Landers, Yeshiva University, these universities and yeshivas that incorporate a secular education for those who would like to pursue a secular profession or need to pursue because they're not cut out for a completely religious or rabbinic lifestyle. And that is a healthy environment to at least leave that as an option. Okay, so I mean, again, I am giving a very political answer, but the answer is again, it really depends on who. The ideal is no university. The ideal is Torah. The question is who's really cut out for that? That's the question. What, Ron?
I saw that movie.
Oh.
You saw that movie?
It's a great movie. It's a classic, Torah.
One more comment.
It's a classic. It's spelled differently, but it's a classic.
Maybe Lakewood would not be what it is without all that.
That's the point. That's the point. Lakewood would definitely
Lakewood
not be what it is if Aaron Kotler was not so strict on this ideology.
Right. Everything has its purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
The
Thank
way
you very much.
universities are today is completely different from what it was years ago.
Right.
For a Jew to go to university today is a very dangerous thing. With the BDS movement, all these kind of movements, which are against the whole way of Jewish life and Jews in particular.
I
So
do.
you're saying now it's easier to go to university or harder to go?
It's much more dangerous for a Jew to be in university now.
Right. That's why, like we said, the only allowance, so to say, for a Jew to go to university is within the Jewish atmosphere, environment, such as Landers or Yeshiva University, and there's obviously other ones.
Yeah.
One more comment. From the Pilpulim, explain to them what Pilpulim of the Gemara.
From the depths, the back and forths, yeah.
Of the Gemara, a lot of those kids from Ner Israel go and pass the bar because their brain is already to be a lawyer, irregardless if they want to be a super rabbi or just become a lawyer, but they study it on their own. They are not pushed because they jump in the evening 2 hours. They give them so many credits for what they study at the yeshiva, John Hopkins. Like my son got the master without the BA because all the credit that they gave him ranked him up to the point that he got the master, which is crazy. I couldn't understand that. But what I was trying to say, they are so smart, the yeshiva boys. They go and conquer the bar exam after 1 year or 2 years, and it's over because they get so many credits. So
listen, what you're saying in other words, what you're saying is of course, yeah. What you're saying in other words is the brain is a muscle, and it's been worked out since a young age, studying Torah and psychoanalyzing different aspects of Torah and halacha and Gemara, and all of that helps towards us being successful in anything we put our minds to, since this mind has been working so much.
I bet you have a psychology degree and law degree, I'm sure.
Who does?
Yeah.
Who?
Could you tell us if you have a psychological degree?
I have no degrees. I have smicha in multiple areas, but no formal secular degrees or education. I do like reading a lot, but that's that.
We're gonna give you a degree. All of us love it.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. It's a great pleasure to have you all here, especially Reb Leib's family members from New York. It's really nice to have you join us.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
I think we should introduce the guests every night. If there is a guest, somebody
Yes,
has to
okay.
introduce.
Let me do it
Yeah.
again.